Okay, let's turn to Andrew Morrison, Viscount Dunrossil. He's the third Viscount Dunrossil. He was born in London in 1953, educated at Eton and Oxford, came to the United States in 1981. He makes his home in San Antonio, Texas, been there for the last 30 years. He's engaged professionally in the banking and financial services industry. Professionally, he is former chairman of the American Financial Services Association. He is also honorary British consul in San Antonio. Very active in his clan society, Andrew is cousin of the chief of the Morrisons and a member of the Standing Council of Scottish Chiefs. He was recently described by the Times of London as an expert on the subject of clans and clan chiefs. I've worked with Andrew in the context of COSCA for the last 7 years. He's on our advisory board. He's been extremely helpful to me and our board. And we've also hosted him in DC for Tartan Day on several past occasions. So we're delighted to hear from Andrew Dunrossil. And Andrew, you're up.
All right. Well, thank you, John. Can you hear me? Is the sound working?
I can. And
good.
Coming through loud and clear.
All right. Well, excellent. Well, thank you. And my thanks also to all of the other sponsoring organizations. This is going to be, as you mentioned, a different kind of conference this year. And I must say it's going to feel a little strange trying to talk into a television screen. I have suddenly enhanced respect for Stephen Colbert and the other late night talk show hosts who are used to dealing with a live audience and suddenly find themselves staring at a screen instead. I feel like a little bit of cannon fodder, like it's very nice to be asked to go first, but reminds me of being asked to open the batting in my first year at Eton for my house. And they explained to me that I was just cannon fodder, I was expendable, I could go first and make all the mistakes, and then the serious batsman would come in after me. Let me also say, before I get any further, I need a quick disclaimer. I'm very honored to be associated with some of these sponsoring organizations. I'm very proud to be on the advisory board of COSCA and to be an honorary patron of the American Scottish Foundation. I'm also a vice chairman now of the Society of Scottish Armigers, whose tie I'm wearing, and as you mentioned, I'm on the executive board of the Standing Council of Scottish Chiefs. Nothing that I am about to say represents the official position of any of those organizations and may not even represent my own views at the end of this conference. So I hope to learn a great deal, but please, if you're listening and you're a journalist or something like that, don't blame any of those organizations with which I have the honor to be associated for any of my views. I am going to use the screen sharing facility here quite extensively, and so you won't have to look at me and my bookshelves too much, and I'll take it off towards the end, but I think it'll help as we move along. So let's see if I can make this work. Well, it may take me just a moment here. Screen save. I'm not making my screen sharing work for the moment, so I may need. See if that works. Can you? Yes, you can see my screen now. Is that right, John? Put a thumb up if you can see it.
Yes,
that's perfect.
Okay. So the subject of this talk is Co Leis Thu, which is Gaelic, more or less, for who are you, and I want to talk about identity in general. The reason I put this up in Gaelic is because it has an interesting different meaning from simply who are you. It means that leis is a preposition that means sort of with and by and so on, and really what's implied here is let us put you into context. How do we put you into context? Who are your parents? Who's your family? Where do you come from? Who do you belong to? So it's in itself, it's asking a question that Scots are used to asking, and we're used to thinking of our identity in terms of the family situation that we were born into. When we look at identity, I think one of the classic ways that we do this is through nature and nurture. We want to say you are either you are who you were born, or you are who you made yourself into, or others have made you into. So one of the dichotomies is between nature and nurture, another is between, you might say, your DNA and the choices you make. And I've put a number of these qualities, these ways that people identify themselves or other people identify them, on the screen in a sort of continual left to right way here, as a continuum. And nothing really is all DNA, or very little is all DNA, and very little is all choice. If you're a Scots Presbyterian, you might say you don't have any free choice at all anyway, and everything is predetermined. But I think, on the other hand, you listen to all sorts of successful people. I mean, an Olympic sprinter will come get their gold medal, and then they'll say, oh, well, this just proves that if you really want to do something and you try hard enough, you can accomplish anything. I don't know about you, but it sickens me every time I hear that, because no, I couldn't have become an Olympic gold medalist. And later on this afternoon, I think you're going to get a presentation from Bruce Dury, who is a wonderful person who's accomplished a great deal in all kinds of different fields. But one quick look at Bruce will tell you that no, however how much he wanted to, he could never have been an Olympic champion sprinter. So it's a much more complex issue than many of us make out much of the time. But DNA roughly on the left, choice on the right. It's been said frequently that there are 5 million people in Scotland, but 50 million around the world who identify as Scots. And that is one of those areas that I put in here. So there's national origin, there's region, and so on. And there's culture and language. But 50 million identify as Scots. That's an enormous number. And I want to give you the story of the Texans at the Alamo here. Tomorrow morning, we're going to have a presentation by Lord Bruce, which is very appropriate because he'll be talking about this being the 700th anniversary of the Declaration of Arbroath, or on the 6th of April it was, which is very important as the seminal Declaration of Independence that inspired, directly or indirectly, the American Declaration and many others. The Scottish Wars of Independence back in the early 14th century had an impact on many other independence struggles, and I think one of the great examples is the Texas struggle for independence from Mexico in the 1830s. When the Texans decided to barricade themselves in the Alamo and fight, what were they thinking of, you might ask? They weren't going to win. What were they thinking of? What would possess them to do that? What inspired them? How did they identify themselves? What did they think of themselves as? And what we've learned from looking at the songs they sang and the songs they quote is that they thought of themselves as Scots at the Battle of Bannockburn, re-fighting the Battle of Bannockburn with a powerful army coming across their southern border, led by a tyrant with a better legal claim to the land. And they decided that they were going to resist and fight because they saw themselves as Scots. And as it happens, over 80% of them were of Scottish descent. But even Travis, who was not a Scot, identified himself with the Scots and with the heroes of Bannockburn. And so it's what led them to take the extraordinary action that they took. There's something very romantic about identifying yourself as Scots. I've had people try to make themselves out of Scots. They come up to me in a Highland Games and they have an obviously Welsh surname or Irish surname, and they say, well, what clan am I in? I must be part of a Scottish clan. And of course, much of the time they're not. But the point I want to make now is that most of those who identify as Scots overseas do so through their surname. And if you go to a Highland Games, you will see crowds around all the tents, the clan tents, with people wanting to know, am I a part of your clan, or someone said I'm a part of your clan. And there are genealogy tents, and there are crowds around that. And again, it's the same question. We had a meeting of the Cosca the other day, and there was a discussion on the website. And I would encourage you all to look at the website for all sorts of different and very informative reasons. But it was said quite clearly that by far the largest number of hits on the website are from people trying to find out what clan they're a member of. Of course, once you find out what your clan is, there will be lots of vendors ready to sell you all sorts of things, and so it's quite an industry. It's the first step to joining that community. And if your name isn't that of a recognizable clan, well, then never fear. Perhaps you're a sept. And if you go to one of these games, you can see outside a clan tent sometimes as many as 20 or even 30 names listed that are supposed to be septs of the clan concerned. Now, from my own point of view, I think that's almost 100% spurious. The word sept is not a Gaelic word. It's not something that is part of traditional Scottish society. In the same way, it's simply really the Irish word for clan. And what's perfectly reasonable is to find variants of the main clan name, and so Gilmore, for instance, is listed as a sept of Morrison. It's not really meaningful to say sept, it's just the same word in Gaelic, and there are lots of other variants of names, and that's perfectly legitimate. I think clans should put those outside, but they will also tend to put up names which really have no exclusive connection with one clan or another. And it's a little unfortunate because you don't really need to be part of a clan to be Scottish. One of the best examples of that is just look at the Scotland rugby team. You won't find 15 more passionate Scots ready to go and fight the French or the English or the Italians or whoever it might be for their country than the Scotland rugby team. But typically there might be just one or two names on amongst those 15 players which would be clan names that we would recognize as clan names. So Scottish surnames fall broadly into 5 types, and only one is really like a clan name. First of all, you have straightforward patronymic, son of this or son of that, and it might be in a son form or a Mac form. Mac just means son of. So examples would be Anderson, Wilson, or Patterson, which are not clans, but they're straightforward patronymics, meaning son of Andrew, son of William, son of Peter or Patrick. The names are the same in Gaelic. Second would be hair colour names, lots and lots of these. The second most common name in Scotland is Brown. Reed means red-haired. I've seen Reed listed as a sept of a clan, but if you know anything about Scotland, you will know that it has the highest percentage of red-haired people in the world, greater even than Ireland. So yes, there are red-haired people all over the country, and not just in one clan. Duff means black, so if your ancestor was a Gaelic speaker and had black hair, then you might be called Duff or Dewey. But lots of other names like that. Bowie, which was a name associated with the Alamo, is Gaelic for yellow-haired. Then there are professions. Smith is the most common name of all in Scotland. Walker and Taylor are a couple of other examples of professions, which again are found all over the country. Fourthly, place names. Your ancestors might have come from a particular area and moved somewhere else, and if that's the case, then they might still be identified as the place they came from. So Angus or Buchan or Lennox are all quite common names in Scotland and just indicate areas of Scotland that the people came from. And then fifthly, there are what we might call extended kindreds, whether you call them clans or families. And these are found both in the Highlands, examples being MacDonald, MacLeod and Campbell, and in the Lowlands, where common kindred names, family names are Armstrong, Gordon and Graham. So what is a clan? There are two main uses of the word, and the first is a broader use. And I think both of these are legitimate, and you see both of these out there. So the broad use is to say any kindred with a chief eligible to sit in the Standing Council of Scottish Chiefs. So the Standing Council of Scottish Chiefs is not just people from the Highlands, it's the heads of lowland families too, but its website is clanchiefs.org.uk. So even if you are the head of the House of Bruce or the House of Gordon or the family of Lindsay, you are a clan chief in that sense. And each of them is a chief of the name, but not all such names are clans in the narrow sense, as we'll discuss. And when you look at these heads of lowland families, not all of them are strictly kindreds either. So some of them are professional names in there, like a hunter or a doer. A doer means a keeper of relics. And wherever there was a saint who left relics, there would be a doer, but they weren't related to each other. A hunter, obviously, is a profession that people followed all over the country, like shepherd. Dunbar is a town. But there are heads, chiefs of the name of Hunter and Dewar and Dunbar in the Standing Council of Chiefs. So in that sense, those are clans. Then more narrowly, more properly, some would argue, you have Highland or Gaelic kindreds with a history of going to war together. And that's, I think, the most familiar and pure kind of the use of the word clan. If you want to dig further into this subject, I can refer you to an article I wrote called Clans, Chiefs and Coats of Arms, which was published in a recent COSCA periodical and can be accessed through the COSCA website, and it was also published by CASOC. So really everybody wants to be in a clan, and every family surname group, whether they are a family or not, whether they're a kindred or not, they want to be listed as a clan. And the gold standard for that means that they've got to have a chief in the Standing Council of Scottish Chiefs. And that's what makes them a noble community in the eyes of Scottish law. And the chief then has to be chief of the name, and he's the chief of everybody with that particular surname, and he has the undifferenced arms, and he is recognized by the Lord Lion. So it is that's the gold standard, really. But I want to say that even within that area, you can have some hybrids. And I think that's the most interesting thing that I'd like to look into with a little more detail today. So some clans are hybrids. They have a group that is Highland and meets the criteria of the purists, but the name is found more widely than that. And this is going to be a problem every time a clan name is also a patronymic. And what we're looking at now with DNA studies is that the DNA will show that not all of these people who share that name are in fact related. And three examples I'll give you are Macaulay, Ferguson and Morrison. The Macaulays of the Isle of Lewis are not related to the Macaulays of Ayrshire. They just share the same name. And to give another little example that's, I think, very interesting is the MacKinnons. If you are a MacKinnon and you live or your ancestors lived in the Inner Hebrides, then you are part of the clan MacKinnon. And in law, wherever you live, if your surname is MacKinnon, then your chief is Anne, who is Madam Anne MacKinnon, who's the chief of Clan MacKinnon. However, if your surname is MacKinnon and you live in the Isle of Lewis, the chances are that you spell your name differently in Gaelic, So instead of being MacFinnan, as the MacKinnons are, the Clan Mackinnon is, it's MacKiernan, but it's anglicised in the same way as Mackinnon. And if you're a MacKiernan living in Lewis, that your DNA would show that you're a Morrison. It's just that that group of Morrisons settled in an area that was dominated by Macaulays and didn't want to use the Morrison name because it was a dangerous name to have in Macaulay country up in that part of Lewis. So they were called MacKiernan, and so the law tells you you're part of the Mackinnon clan, and your DNA tells you you're part of the Morrisons. So if you're trying to work out, is a name that is a Mac something or a something son a clan or a patronymic, you look at 5 different things. First of all, you look to see if you have a chief of the name who is in the standing council who's been recognised by the Lord Lion. Secondly, you would look at the DNA. And thirdly, you might look at a clan map to see, can I find where my clan lives? Are we listed? And then fourth, I would suggest you should look at the phone book. And fifth, we can talk about tradition, and this is what I meant by a history of acting as a unit going to war. And if you're looking at some very common names like Anderson, Wilson, Simpson, Patterson, for instance, they fail all 5 of those tests. So we know that they are straightforward patronymics. But what about the Morrisons? Let's look at this as an example, what I was calling a hybrid to begin with. So first of all, yes, there is a chief of the name and arms. I've chosen to put this picture up. The one on the left is of our late chief, Dr. J. Ruairi Morrison, my cousin Roo, who was chief of Clan Morrison until he unfortunately died of a brain tumour this year. He will be succeeded by his son Alistair. So he is standing in a very chiefly pose on the left, and on the right you'll see him standing with myself and with the Lord Lion King of Arms. And he's wearing his 3 feathers in his cap, Roo is, and no way would the Lord Lion King of Arms allow himself to be photographed next to someone with 3 feathers in their cap if they were not a genuine chief of the name and arms. So yes, and you can see also the undifferenced arms behind him in the picture on the left. So yes, we have a chief of the name and arms. The DNA, on the other hand, shows a very different picture. There are over 600 people in North America who signed up for the Morrison DNA project, and it shows 68 distinct genetic groups representing almost every historical county in Scotland. So it's widely diverse, and the conclusion of the administrator of this DNA project is that the name really is a straightforward patronymic. Look at the clan maps. Apologies to those who listened to me talk about this last year, because I showed the same map on that occasion. But you can see up an area coloured in green in the top of this map of Scottish clans. And if you look very, very closely, you can see the name Morrison written in various places on that map. Well, the trouble is that it's the green and the name Morrison were added by someone who was using a Sharpie, who was trying to indicate where we came from, and was a little hurt that he couldn't find us on a conventional clan map. Lots of clan maps show Morrisons nowhere at all, and others show us simply in the butt of Lewis, which is the farther northernmost tip of the Outer Hebrides. And so that if we were a clan at all, we must have been a very, very tiny one. Well, let's then look at the phone book, which shows a very different picture. Morrison is the 18th most common name in Scotland. And I've done a little cheat for you because I've already mentioned it, but number 1 is Smith and number 2 is Brown. In the Highlands and Islands, it's the 8th or 9th most common name. So clearly much more common in the Highlands. Up in the Highlands and Islands, the most common names are MacLeod and MacDonald, and Smith, which is the most common in Scotland as a whole, is only the 10th most common name in Scotland. So there are more Morrisons than Smiths in the Highlands and Islands. And it's the 3rd most common name in the Outer Hebrides, again after MacDonald and MacLeod. So there's a clear area of concentration, evidence of a core group. And really, when you think about it, it couldn't be just a patronymic. Morrison, if it were a patronymic, would be son of Morris, and that was never a common name in the Highlands, and certainly nothing like as common as Andrew or Callum or John or Peter or Patrick or Thomas or Fergus or Angus. But there are far more Morrisons than Andersons, McCallums, Pattersons, Thompsons or McTavishes or Fergusons or McInneses. And so it's obviously not a patronymic in the Highlands. And since I know you're all wondering, well, what are the most common names in the Highlands and Islands today? I've listed them here for you. There's the top 4 are MacDonald, MacLeod, Mackenzie and Mackay. And then the next group of 6 are Campbell, MacLean, Ross, Morrison, Fraser, and then Smith. And then the next 9, Sutherland, Cameron, Stewart, Robertson, Grant, McLennan, Murray, Sinclair, Monroe, and then Wilson. And then finally McKeever, McRae, McKinnon, McIntosh, and Matheson. So there are only 2 non-Highland clan names in that top 25 names in the Highlands and Islands. One is a profession and the other a patronymic, Wilson. Tradition is a very important element, and I'd like to be able to say something about this, but the tradition as exemplified by the 17th century writer John Morrison of Braga in Lewis, known as the Indweller, writing about 1680, he said that all Morrisons may challenge descent from the same Norwegian royal family, someone who settled on Lewis. And you'd have to assume that he settled there around 1000 AD, maybe a little before that. And the 3 original clans, says John Morrison of Lewis, were Morrisons, Macaulays and MacNichols. And then, of course, the MacLeods took over most of the island starting around 1350. And they had, therefore, a very obvious geographical center. They had, the tradition was that everyone was descended from this original eponymous ancestor, Morris, son of a king of Norway. There's a castle that you have to have a castle. Genestian is the sort of fortress of the Morrisons of Lewis. And there are plenty of stories of battles and so on. Most of them fought with Macaulays and MacLeods up there. So the tradition was such, was important because when the Clan Society was founded in Edinburgh in 1909, the founders were all convinced that they were all descended from this core group up in the Isle of Lewis. And Hugh Morrison gave a speech. He was the historian and librarian of the Carnegie Library in Edinburgh. He records all these traditions and says, these are our traditions. And if you grow up as a Morrison anywhere in Scotland, you like to think that your ancestors were the Breves, the hereditary judges and lawgivers of the islands. And because of that, it was when they eventually identified and chose a chief, a new chief of the line. He was listed as being the first chief for 350 years of the clan. This heritage, this common tradition, is reflected in these arms. And you can see that they identify as an island clan by having the dolphins, these spectacular dolphins, as the supporters, and you can see them coming out of the waves to show that it's an island. Driftwood was a tradition. The idea was that this eponymous ancestor drifted ashore on driftwood. You have looking at the shield itself on the sort of top left corner, you can see a lion holding an axe, and that is the Royal Lion of Norway, to indicate this Viking ancestry. So all of that is reflected in the arms, which were there in place before the chief was even identified. I think what I'm going to do is to stop the screen sharing now and talk at you a little more, because you may be tired of simply reading off the screen. When you look at traditions, I think there's a tendency to oppose science in the form of DNA with tradition, and that makes some sense. And so people who are very interested in DNA will tend to ask, is it true? Is the story true? And I would ask also, does it matter if it's true or not? Take an example of the MacNeils of Barra. Their tradition was that they were all descended from Niall of the Nine Hostages, the great king of all Ireland. And when they came to do their DNA, it turned out that actually they were Vikings. They were Norse, like a lot of people in the Outer Hebrides. But that didn't change their identity, and it doesn't change who they really are as Gaels. That is part of their cultural heritage and cultural identity, and has been for 1,000 years. So in many ways, I don't think the DNA changes very much when it comes to identity. I think that the role of tradition is immensely important in forming a sense of community and a sense of pride in that history, in that heritage, and in that communal identity. And it was the job of a Shenachie in any clan to come up with these sorts of stories. We translate Shenachie as historian as if their job was to find out what really had happened in history. Well, it wasn't. They didn't have that access to that kind of information anyway, but it was more to come up with a glorious story that everybody, ancestry story, origin story that everyone could believe in. And that played a role in uniting people, whatever their DNA background, their family background might have been. And I look as an example of something similar going on. I look at the story of the children of Israel in the Bible. And at some point, historians would say, at some point, these 12 tribes came into confederation. And then at some later point, they wanted to find a way to become a true nation rather than simply a confederation of 12 tribes. And so a Shenachie came up with this idea that they had 12 eponymous ancestors who were all brothers, who were all children of the same father, variously called Jacob or Israel. And so that's what made them a nation. That's what bound them together and gave them their collective identity. It wasn't the DNA, it was the tradition. So a couple of conclusions. The Co Leis Thu, who do you belong to? Who are you? Who's your family? Who are you really? Are surname, DNA, and community coextensive? And the answer is obviously not. We know that now. And it's certainly not in the case of the Morrisons, and not in many other cases. Does your DNA dictate your clan affiliation? Nope, it doesn't, as we've seen with the McKinnons. If you're a McKinnon and your ancestors were Morrisons, but your surname is now McKinnon, under law you are a member of Clan McKinnon. Don't be disappointed if you don't share your Y DNA with your chief. There are all sorts of reasons your chief might have different DNA from the majority of people in his clan. One thing to look at is the role of adoption in Celtic societies. Another is succession through the female line. It's been said that the Earl of Cromarty, the chief of the Mackenzies, is 5 times not a Mackenzie because his ancestors succeeded through the female line 5 times. Under the Celtic understanding, that has does not in any way undermine his status as chief of the clan of Mackenzie, because they look at adoption and succession through the female line as perfectly legitimate. I like to give the story of a breve, one before the Morrison, under the old dispensation, when the chief of the clan was the breve in Lewis. He had only a daughter. The daughter married a MacDonald, and the MacDonald took the name of Morrison and became the next breve after his appropriate training. At that point, he didn't stop. He stopped being a MacDonald, and he became, even though his DNA hadn't changed, and he became a Morrison. A couple of generations later, another breve on his deathbed around the 1570s confessed to being the natural father of the presumed heir of the MacLeods of Lewis, which then set off the troubles of the Lewis, as they were called, this sort of 50-year civil war. And if he hadn't made this confession, then his son, Torquil Conanach, would have succeeded as chief of the MacLeods of Lewis. And you could say that by his DNA, he would have been a Morrison, really, because his natural father was a Morrison. But as we've seen, actually his DNA would show that he was a MacDonald. And those are, in any case, the three most common names in the Outer Hebrides. So I'm sure everyone's a little bit of all three. But no, your chief might have a very different set of DNA from you, and for all sorts of different reasons. What is a clan today? Do we still need clans? Again, I try to address this in that article that I mentioned earlier. We don't all live in the same glen if we're members of a clan today. We're not all living together and we just need a chief to lead us to war. We're a disparate assortment looking for meaning and cohesion. And clans and chiefs can provide that wherever we are living, almost regardless of DNA. They offer meaning, identity, and community, something to be proud of. Just this morning, a musician on the Isle of Lewis called Ian Morrison released a new CD, and I've been listening to it. I'm very happy and proud of his achievements because I share a surname with him and we are members of a clan, so we're still looking at that. I like to quote the notorious RBG, which anyone in America will probably know is the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the Justice of the Supreme Court. She said that a meaningful life is one lived not just for oneself, but for one's community. And I feel very strongly that being a member of some larger group like this can massively enhance one's sense of purpose in life and one's sense of identity. Does that mean if your name is Smith, for instance, that you don't have access to that because you're not part of a clan? Absolutely not. I think that you can look at her inherited characteristics. If you have some special manual dexterity, you might want to think maybe it's because you had ancestors who were skilled smiths. If your name is Curry and you have a tendency to want to write poetry, then maybe you'll want to say, you know, maybe this is because my ancestors were the great bards. If you're a Beaton, you might want to look at a history, a career in medicine for the same reason. There's more models of clan heritage that can be meaningful than simply, oh, did we go to war with our neighbors and did we beat them up or did we lose to them? One of my favorite quotations is from the great Gaelic scholar Alexander Carmichael. It's become obvious why it's my favorite quotation. But Alexander Carmichael, who lived in the Outer Hebrides during the middle of the 19th century, wrote that the Morrisons have been celebrated throughout the ages for their wit, poetry, music, philosophy, medicine and science, for their independence of mind and sobriety of judgment, and for their benevolence of heart and unfailing hospitality. So as a Morrison, I'm extremely proud of those characteristics, even if we didn't tend to beat up on the Macaulays and MacLeods very often. it is a sense of community. And again, if you're not part of a clan, you still have Scottish societies, you have St Andrews groups. If your name is a geographical name, you have the Scottish District Families Association, which is also affiliated with COSCA. There is a group that you can find a place in that will welcome you. Clans and surnames are really no more than a doorway to a wider community, and that wider community, of course, is Scotland as a whole. And if you are a Scot, then you have a great deal to be proud of anyway, or we wouldn't all be here. Okay, that's the end of my prepared remarks, such as they are, and I'm going to go to the chat function to see if we have any questions.
If I could, at this point, interject, folks. Can you hear me? Andrew, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Put my moderator's hat on for a minute. As I mentioned earlier, we don't have the capability of the software for you in the attendee group to just speak out loud a question. So you're going to have to enter it into, put it in writing and put it in the little box at the bottom of your screen, which says Q&A. So if you type it in there, I will see it, Andrew will see it, and we'll be able to answer it. We have 5-10 minutes left in this session, good 5 or 10 minutes at least, so we can take some questions. I'll throw one out to you, Andrew, while we're waiting for some questions to come into the Q&A box.
Okay.
My grandfather emigrated from Scotland, so that was just 2 generations ago, and so it's been very easy for me to go back and find his lineage. And of course, I look in there, and I'm happy to see that, you know, we were MacGregors, and that's fine. And I know where we came from on Loch Lomond, but there's an awful lot of other people on that tree. If you go back a few generations, including our traditional enemies, the Campbells, the Cahoons, and then you look around, you find Lammonts and others. So taking it back 7 or 8 generations, I find a host of traditional clan names associated with me. And I guess I could go off and join one of their clan societies too, as well as the MacGregors, but maybe that's cheating. Do you have some thoughts on that?
Yes, I do. You know, funnily enough, this topic came up quite recently within the Standing Council, and Elizabeth Rhodes, who is, as you know, a very experienced senior herald within the Court of the Lord Lion, is firmly of the view that you can only be a member of one clan, and that is the clan that your surname tells you you're a member of. Now, there is a distinction to be made between a clan and a clan society. So if you like, you're a member of a clan by birth through your DNA, but you choose to be, to go back to that continuum, you choose to be a member of a clan society, and as a member of that clan society, you can honor and support all sorts of different groups that you might find yourself related to, or that you simply might want to be a fan of. I mean, I think I came across somebody who just liked a surname, liked the tradition associated with a particular clan. He couldn't prove any blood connection with them at all, but joined their clan society because he thought it was a cool thing to do, a cool clan. So there is a distinction to be made there, but you're only a member of one clan, is Elizabeth's view.
Well, I think that's probably helps for most of us to figure out where we belong. So if in my instance, my grandfather was an ethnic MacGregor, even though he didn't bear the MacGregor surname, there's reasons for that. We can talk about that at some point. I'm sure the following speaker, Keith MacGregor, will get into that. So we're MacGregors, and the fact that I'm Campbells and Cahoons and others on the tree is interesting, but it's not the main road for me to go down when I'm trying to identify myself in my clan connection.
Most people who see themselves principally as MacGregors are not usually too interested in honoring Campbells or Cahoons or McLarens.
There's some truth to that.
Yeah. So we have a couple of questions here now.
before you start answering them, let me say we're getting some messages in the chat function, and I said this for Jamie and for Bill, who are our IT wizards behind the screen. Some people are saying they're not able to utilize the Q&A function. They're trying and they're not getting their questions in there.
Okay.
So take a look at that. But some are successful. So Andrew, why don't you go ahead and pick what you'd like from the list there.
Well, I just see on that chat function that Bruce Dury is saying he's going to show me his Olympic gold medal for sprinting later on.
Why am I not surprised?
Yeah, well, we know there's one here about the McGregors, which we've talked about. I mean, why the name was prescribed, of course, so you were not allowed to use the name McGregor, and so obviously you've had to use different names in the past, unless you wanted your head chopped off. Clan chiefs are indeed members of the Standing Council, but not all chiefs are clan chiefs. Heads of families are also considered chiefs. That does not make them chiefs of clans. Yeah, I mean, I think what we've got is as I was trying to explain it before, two different uses of the word clan. In some senses, everybody who is a member of the Standing Council of Scottish Chiefs is the chief of a clan. The website says clanchiefs.org.uk or whatever it is. But in a more traditional sense, you have to be a particular type of family, a particular type of surname to be a real clan, and both of those uses are out there. I think if you're running a Highland Games in this country and you want to know whether you can allow a group to come and put up a tent in your clan tent area, some people find it's easiest to go by whether or not the surname group concerned has a chief in the Standing Council of Scottish Chiefs, and if they do, then they'll let them in regardless of whether the surname group concerned is really Highland or Lowland, and whether it's maybe a place name or a traditional kindred. It just happens that some of those are in there in the Standing Council anyway, and so it's just a good way of saying this is a legitimate group.
Could I throw one more curve at you?
Yep.
There are, I think, a few outliers for those of us of Highland heritage that we know of in terms of how clanship is defined. You mentioned the McGregors, a name was proscribed. There are a couple of other instances in history of names being proscribed. So for us McGregors who had to change their name, some changed it back, some never did, the DNA connection becomes very important because that shows that you did have McGregor blood. So in that sense, that's kind of an outlier. On the other hand, you have, as I understand it, and if I'm wrong, somebody I'm sure will correct me, you have the sprawling MacDonald family, which is 5 or 6 fairly distinct clans and have been treated as distinct clans historically, that share the surname MacDonald. And as I understand it, the High Chief of Clan Donald quite some time ago said, if you owned land up in our neck of the woods, you're a member of Clan Donald. So you may have those, 50, 60, 70 surnames you find on the MacDonald tent, all saying they're members of Clan Donald, and the chief says they are because they held land from him. So what do you think?
I think that Clan Donald is really a special case in some respects because they were almost kings of their own country. They were kings of their own country, the kingdom of the Isles. And as such, they could argue in some ways that all clan names within the area that they ruled were in some senses septs of their own clan. Because all of these other clans held land, arguably in some ways, from them as the kings of that area, and later the lordship of the Isles. But yes, I think this is one of those awkward features about septs. Someone is going to write something definitive about septs at some point. I'm more skeptical than most. But clearly there is a case for saying if you were a family or surname group that lived under the protection of a larger surname group, and were more likely to go to war when they went to war as providing a unit within their larger army, then you are a sept, and that's kind of what a sept is supposed to mean. I think that's pretty rare. I think for the most part, most clans don't have any septs that way, and most of the names that get listed on as septs outside a clan name, outside a clan tent, are variants of the surname, which is not the same thing as a sept at all.
Here's my last kind of curveball for you, and then we'll see if we have a few more questions in the Q&A box. I understand, by the way, from our IT people that the function is working perfectly well.
It's working fine. Thank you.
Yeah, it is working. So if you'd like to ask a question, put it in the Q&A box, please, and we'll try to get to it. So my third kind of curveball for you, Andrew, is this. We know historically that some clans, if they dominated an area, went around fairly aggressively, cajoling and even sometimes forcing people with other names, family names, who lived in their area and kind of came within the power of their chiefs to change their name. The Campbells were known for doing that. The Frasers are known for doing that. The Bolamil Frasers, the Chisholms did it, and others did it. If they had the power to do it, they did it. So maybe your ancestor was a McKeever, as many of them tell me they were once upon a time, and at some point they were forced to become Campbells. So are they McKeevers or are they Campbells?
If their surname is McKeever and they have a McKeever chief, then they are under law, Elizabeth would say, McKeevers. If their surname is now Campbell, then they are Campbells, and this is the case with the unless they want to change their name back, at which point they can become McKeevers again. But the surname, certainly under sort of heraldic law, where you have a chief of the name is the determining factor there. I see someone has put down here that their surname is Brown, and 2 clans claim them as septs. I think that's hilarious. And obviously that's a classic example of what's wrong with clans putting up these massive lists of septs, because clearly brown hair is extremely common and the country, and presumably in every single clan. So it is ridiculous for one clan or another to claim the surname Brown as a sept, but it's what goes on.
I think we have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions, and then we're going to move on to stay on schedule. I do see a question in here that was asked, why are women not part of the DNA studies? We'll certainly be addressing that. The next panel will be addressing it. It has to do with the Y chromosome, but I'm sure that they'll get into that. It's not that simple by any means. But let's leave that. Unless you'd like to tackle that, Andrew, we'll leave that for you.
I've seen a couple of other questions I could tackle very quickly here. One says, does the Lord Lion recognize a clan chief who is not a member of the Standing Council? Yes, the important thing is that the Lord Lion recognizes someone as clan chief there. They are then eligible to be invited to join the Standing Council, but their membership at the Standing Council is not automatic. They have to say, yes, I want to join, and they have to pay their dues. But yes, they would be eligible to become members of the Standing Council once they had been confirmed as chief of the name and arms by the Lord Lion.
So I'm sure the Standing Council's goal is to have all chiefs of the name members, but they are not all members because they haven't all taken the necessary steps, right?
Right, and clearly some are not interested. They've inherited a position and they don't particularly care for clan affairs, which is unfortunate. Yes, Jennifer Wolcott says I should actually mention that clan translates to children, and that's why it is a kindred. It's usually seen of as a kindred in that kind of way, when not all surname groups are kindreds. And it's a Gaelic word as well, so it's in its pure sense, to be a clan, you do have to be from the Gaeltacht. You do have to be from the Highlands and Islands. There are some who would say that the word clan can apply to certain lowland family groups that acted like clans. And I think the key phrase there is acted like a clan. So the Armstrongs famously could put so many horsemen in the field, but that didn't really make them a clan in that sense. I think that was just made them a very large and powerful family. So if you're using the purest definition of clan, you really have to be from the Highlands and Islands, where the Gaelic language was the dominant language.
Let's take one more, and then we're going to thank Andrew for his very interesting presentation, and we're going to move on. Is there another one there that you'd like to tackle?
Let's see. Some of these are more comments than questions. Someone saying, as a Texan, your opening statement about the men at the Alamo is quite interesting. Yes, I apologize if my Texan accent was not all that intelligible sometimes.
He's an adopted Texan.
I've been here long enough, but I'm a slow learner. Yes, I think that's really all. I mean, it is. If you really want to delve deeper into this, please feel free to read that article that is on the COSCA website and was in the last, I think, COSCA and CASOC newsletters. And then you can raise your complaints with me and write to me, and we can have a good old discussion offline about it.
We want to thank you, Andrew, very much for your presentation. And we'll be in touch, and we hope you'll be able to stay with us and listen to some more of the presentations today.
Absolutely. I look forward to it. Thank you.